I never believed in the supernatural. Ghost stories were just stories, entertainment around campfires, or urban legends shared in hushed tones at sleepovers. I was a rational person, grounded in facts, science, and logic. That changed the day I moved into my grandmother's house. She had passed away the month before, and since I was her only remaining family, the property was left to me. It was an old, Victorian-style house on the outskirts of town, built in the late 1800s, and it had stood the test of time surprisingly well. I always remembered visiting it as a child and feeling uneasy, but I chalked that up to the creaky floorboards and outdated decor. When I moved in, I started cleaning the place room by room. It wasn't until my third day that I decided to open the attic. The wooden door groaned in protest as I pulled it open. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the air that escaped smelled like mildew and forgotten memories. I climbed the narrow staircase, flashlight in hand, pushing past cobwebs and old furniture covered in white sheets. At the far end of the attic was an old trunk. It was locked, but the key was taped to the underside of the lid, a classic move from my grandmother. She always had her quirks. When I opened the trunk, I found old photographs, yellowed letters, and at the very bottom, a porcelain doll. It was beautifully crafted but unnerving. Its skin was pale white, with rosy cheeks, tiny red lips, and wide glass eyes that shimmered even in the dim light. It wore a lace dress stained with time and a faded blue ribbon tied in its hair. But what truly disturbed me was the expression on its face. It didn't look innocent or sweet. It looked amused. I placed the doll on a shelf in the living room, thinking it was a piece of my grandmother's past and maybe even valuable. That night I started hearing noises, footsteps, not heavy ones, just soft, deliberate steps that echoed faintly across the hardwood floors. I assumed it was the house settling until I heard the soft creak of the attic stairs. I froze in bed, heart pounding. I told myself it was nothing. Old house, creaks and groans, maybe a raccoon in the roof. But the next morning, the doll was no longer on the shelf. I found it sitting on the coffee table facing the couch. I live alone. That was the first time I felt truly afraid. I put the doll back on the shelf, trying not to overthink it. I told myself I must have forgotten moving it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I just didn't remember. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Every morning, the doll would be in a new spot, on the windowsill, on a kitchen chair, once even in my bathroom sink. I began to dread waking up, afraid of where it might turn up next. I tried locking it in a cabinet. The next morning, the cabinet was open. The lock snapped clean off. The doll was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at me. That night, I threw it back in the attic. I locked the attic door and even pushed a dresser in front of it. But at 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of laughter. Not a child's giggle, not quite human, just a soft, broken laugh that echoed through the hallway. I sat up in bed, breath shallow. And then, the doorknob to my bedroom began to turn, slowly, rhythmically. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. It was as if something held my voice in its hand. The door never opened. But the next morning, the doll was on my pillow. That was the final straw. I packed it in a box, drove 2 hours out of town, and buried it deep in the woods. I didn't just drop it, I buried it under rocks, mud, and branches, and I never looked back. Weeks passed. No sounds, no movements. I finally felt peace. Until last night, I came home from work, walked into my living room and stopped cold. There on the shelf where it all began was the doll. Her dress still dirty, her ribbon faded, but her smile wider than before.